Okay, so before I begin this discussion, let's just talk about 140s as a whole, because we need to do a bit of framing. The modern day 140 RPM hand cannon is a curious beast. It has a very slow TTK of 0.87 seconds, and they are also just insanely punishing for no reason. Okay, if you miss a headshot on a 140, your TTK goes from a 0.87 to a 1.3, right? That's pretty rough, but you might say maybe they make up for this in, body shot flexibility. They don't. The body shot TTK for a 140 hand cannon is 2.17, which is you may as well not even be shooting them at all. The body shot TTK, full body shots, by the way, for a 450 pulse is like 1.5 seconds, right? And pulses have more aim assist than 140s. So 140s are like just objectively one of the worst archetypes in the game right now. Compounding on top of this is the fact that 140s are just impossible to scale, right? So with a 120, you start out with a 1 second flat TTK, which is pretty damn rough. But then as soon as you get one kill, you have Adagio, because if you're not memeing, then you have Adagio on your 120, and your TTK drops to like half a second, right? I think it's 0.6 with Adagio's RPM reduction. But anyway, you have this insane payoff for getting a single final blow with the 120. 140s don't have that. And you might say, okay, well, obviously 140s can't peak shot as well as a 120, and, they can't raw TTK as hard as a pulse rifle, and they can't duel as well as an AR, but maybe they're just like a combination of all of that. But they're not. So 140s don't deal enough damage. So when Edge of Fate launched, the old recovery system was swapped out for the new health stat, which just affects your shield regen. However, the consequence of that is that 200 health stat is fucking nuts. And I do mean nuts in PvP. And so what that means is you duck into cover for 5 seconds and you peek back out. And now you have more than enough health to survive the 143 tap. And sometimes you can even survive the 2 tap and then the additional peak shot 2 tap. And in dueling, it's the same. To hit 230 damage, you need all 3 headshots with a hand cannon. If your enemy is healing even a little bit, you miss the TTK. If your enemy has a Void Overshield, you miss the TTK. If your enemy has basically any DR at all from like Facet of Protection or something, then you miss the TTK. And it doesn't make any sense. 140s are supposed to be like the gold standard of PvP, and they just got left out to dry. And so you have this very curious conundrum where 140 hand cannons are simultaneously bad at dueling because you just lose to pulse rifles because pulse rifles are easier to use, they flinch you more, and they have a faster TTK on top of that. And you also lose at peak shotting because if you're peak shotting against a pulse rifle, the pulse rifle will just step backwards and then you just can't touch them. But then additionally, you also lose to 120s because 120s can step backwards. They can allow a little bit of regen and peek you and still get the kill off. And so 140s just kind of have nowhere to sit, which is a real shame because I think 140s are probably the most fun archetype to use. I have in the past advocated for rebuffing 140s to 150s, and I think that would fix a lot of these issues. But this is all just to provide context for the 140 archetype, right? They're not the best. They're in a rough spot. There's basically no reason to ever use one. But then you come to Rose, which happens to be the most used weapon inside all of PvP. And so, what's that all about? Previously, I stated that 140s are one of the most fun weapons to use. And I think that's actually really true. Like, 140s are probably the most skill-expressive weapon in Destiny 2. If you miss your headshot, you just don't get the kill, right? If you wait too long to peek, you don't get the kill. If you push too far outside your range, you don't get the kill. All of these things are things that are not punished by other weapons. If you're outside of range for an AR with Zen Moment, you're still getting the kill, right? If you're outside of range with a pulse rifle, it's still just going to nuke people across the map. Scout rifles, despite sucking at close range, excel at long range and basically just have infinite range past that. Like, there are these flexible ranges for these weapons. Meanwhile, 140 hand cannons don't have that, right? If you're not in your optimal range with a 140, it's just going to instantly nuke you off the map. And so I think part of the reason people enjoy using 140s and specifically Rose so much is because it punishes you. It's one of the few weapons that forces you to kind of get good at the game, use your brain a little bit, just kind of not play like a brainlet. And very few weapons in the sandbox do that anymore. Now that I've explained 140s a little more, I now want to explain what differentiates Rose from these 140s and why it's like a little bit of a problem. So compared to other archetypes of weapons, 140s typically have like a really noticeable downside on each individual weapon that gets issued. Compare this with like SMGs, right? Immortal, Shira's Wrath, Multi-Mac. These are all weapons that are just insane out of the box. There's nothing wrong with them. They have nutty perk pulls, like the best possible perks you could have on the gun. Think about pulse rifles, BXR, Martlet, S-Stock, Shattering Bone. These are weapons that have, the best possible perks for a pulse rifle on them. And they also have good base stats. 140 hand cannons are not like this. The most recent 140 hand cannon that came out, and everybody was touting it as the best thing that's ever been birthed, Corundum Hammer, has 75 aim assist and an 80 recoil stat at base. These are crippling downsides that force you to sacrifice in your stat package, in your perk package, to try and compensate for these horrible downsides. Think about, one of the better hand cannons, Austringer. It just doesn't have slide shot. It's just missing that extremely core perk from the perk pool, despite it being one of the most preferred hand cannons. Think about Exalted Truth, which is probably still best in slot Energy 140. I think you could argue for Finite Impactor's Reprise, but I think Exalted Truth still takes it because it has stuff like Slide Shot, Eye of the Storm. But it has the worst in-slot aim assist of like any 140. It's like bottom 3 140 aim assist that has ever been released. And so, yeah, it's an uber stat. It has really good range and, really solid other stats, but it's just worse. It's just worse than other hand cannons because it has no aim assist. And so you have to compensate for that with like adept aim assist. And so then you don't get adept range or, these very noticeable downsides with the outliers in the archetype. And so then you come to Rose, and Rose just doesn't have any of that. Like, think about it this way, okay? Rose has a little bit of a weaker base stat package, but in exchange for sacrificing its origin trait, which basically no 140 has a good origin trait, so it's not really losing out on much, it gets one of the best base stat packages in the game, which is fucking crazy considering out of the box, it has 85 aim assist, which is like best in slot. I'm actually not sure that there's a hand cannon that has more aim assist than that. Okay, yeah, I just checked. So I think Dire Promise and Jack Queen King are two of the hand cannons with like the most aim assist, and that's just because they have sights, which give 5 aim assist just for equipping them. So they're sacrificing base stats from barrels in order to get a little bit of extra aim assist from sights, which makes sense, but Bungie doesn't do this with hand cannons anymore. So these are very much like weapons that have been hard power crept, but they just have slightly more aim assist because they are using an old system. So, okay, Rose has better aim assist and comparable base stats with every other 140. Surely it has a weaker perk pool or something to counteract this. And you'd be wrong, because Rose has arguably the strongest perk pool of any 140. It's got Slide Shot, which is just the best 140 perk. It's got Rangefinder, Eye of the Storm, Explosive Payload, Snapshot, Opening Shot, all of these insane perks. Personally, I think Eye of the Storm is just like the best 4th column hand cannon perk in the game because paired with Slide Shot, it covers basically all your bases and counters a whole bunch of flinch and basically does everything that you want it to do. But you can really make arguments for any perk in this column. And so, insanely strong perk pool, insanely strong stat package, insanely outlier band aim assist. So, okay, Rose has no weaknesses. That's fine, you might say, All of that makes it a really good all-arounder, and we're just waiting for the next Usain Bolt to come out and, sweep Rose because it has such insane range despite sacrificing handling or something. Well, that's where you'd be wrong, because Rose is also a lightweight weapon. What does this entail? Well, in contrast to Adaptive Frame, which gives you literally nothing, and is every single other 140 in the game, except for the precision frame 140s, which I could have an entire separate conversation on those, but they are basically the only thing that gives Rose any kind of competition, and I'm not going to get into them in this video. Lightweight frame gives you plus 20 mobility, which means 7% faster strafe speed, and also a 6.25% forward movement speed bonus that applies to sprint. And so, holding out your Rose, you are just simply moving faster than every other hand cannon in the game, which is insane. Okay, this is just insane. This is an insane bonus to give to one hand cannon that also just happens to be the best in every other category when you add everything together. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck is that? If Rose had 20 less range, it would still be, like, easily a contender for best in slot. If Rose had 5 less aim assist, it would still be best in the game. If Rose had 7 less aim assist, it would still be like best in the game. Rose is just nuts from all sides, and it has no competitors. And here's the thing, I doubt it ever will, because Bungie does not understand how powerful the lightweight frame is. When the game launched, the lightweight frame was used on specific weapons that were worse at base in order to make them a little better. And then after the Go Fast update, the lightweight frame kind of like was unbalanced because it was just on the best archetypes. Like 150 hand cannons were really good and they just had lightweight as well on top of all their other bonuses, right? Lightweight SMGs have historically been really good and they just also have a free sprint bonus for holding them out. 450 pulses now, lightweight 450s like Martlet, just some free movement speed despite being probably the best archetype of pulse in the game right now. And so you take this bonus that has just been the best frame bonus in the game. All the other frames give you basically nothing except for like precision frame, which gives you some horizontal recoil reduction, which is why precision fusions are so insane. But you take this bonus and you give it to a 140 hand cannon, and then you never make any competitors. And so what this means is that Rose is just the best 140 in the game, bar none, with no competition, and it probably will never have competition because Bungie is stupid. So what does this mean for 140s as a whole? Well, think about it like this. SMGs, the entire 600 RPM archetype of SMGs suffered for Shayura's Wrath being just the best gun in the game for a while, right? 600s were just like an objectively balanced archetype, and they got the entire zoom stat nerfed and multiple like other things nerfed about SMGs. Is the same thing gonna happen to 140s? Like 140s suck, dude. Is Bungie really gonna nerf 140s because Rose is just the best gun in the archetype, despite the archetype sucking? And Rose being like a playable gun, despite being an insane outlier in the archetype? Like, where the fuck do you go from here? Like, okay, Spare Rations is about to get reissued, right? You have the whole DMG tweet about, oh, we're reissuing Gambit weapons. If you could see any Gambit weapons, what would they be, right? Spare Rations is getting reissued. Imagine if it had lightweight, right? Somebody on the Sandbox team grows some balls and puts lightweight on Spare Rations, and then we have Spare Rations with whatever new origin trait, hopefully a good one, and a lightweight. Now you just have the same issue again, but this time you have to power creep even further, right? So every 140 is now in the dust except for Rose and Spare Rations. What happens the next time? You bring Exalted Truth back with lightweight? What you bring Palindrome back with lightweight? Like, either every 140 has to have lightweight or no 140 can have lightweight, because the lightweight frame bonus is just that fucked, dude. It's just that good. And the fact that it exists on Rose, the hand cannon with the best like total package compared to every other hand cannon, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Are we insane? Are we mentally deficient? Are we perhaps just like needling people in the side for fun? We are just holding a sewing needle and we're just poking people with it to see what happens. Like, this is the most diabolical Sandbox oversight since like Hard Light. And it doesn't matter because 140s suck. But imagine if 140s were the best archetype in the game. This would make the game unplayable. It would be one weapon. It would be back to Thorn Fellwinters, right? It would just be Rose and whatever pairs best with Rose. This is such an insane thing to have exist. And you have to understand, this has been how the game has been since Season 17, which launched 3 years and 327 days ago. This has been ongoing for years. So, again, what does Bungie do about this, right? Well, there are kind of like two paths. Path 1 is you nerf Rose and you buff 140s, and path 2 is you buff 140s up to where Rose is now. And let me just say this right now, path 2 is basically impossible because that entails going back and buffing like 50 individual weapons up to where Rose is. So, okay, there's one path you can take to fix the 140 archetype and then get them back to usability in the sandbox, and that is to nerf Rose and then buff 140s. So how do you even do this? Well, step 1 is like really obvious. You have to take lightweight away from Rose or give it to 140s as a whole entire archetype. Rose cannot continue being the only hand cannon that just simply makes you move faster for having it equipped. It's just really dumb. Okay, so let's say that you just gave every 140 lightweight, which I think is the better solution. Like, 140s kind of need a different edge. You can't just make them 2 head, 1 body, or the game becomes shit, and you can't just give them a ton of range because then the game becomes shit again, and you can't just give them aim assist because then the game becomes shit again. So you give 140s lightweight as an entire archetype, or alternatively, you just make all 140s 150s, and you maybe reduce their damage a bit, or you leave their damage exactly the same. I think it would just be fine like that. But then what do you do next? I think the best solution is probably through perks. Like, Precision Instrument comes really close to being what 140s need to be viable right now, but it's just not good enough because as a perk, it's designed to work on like 260 scouts, and then you have this being co-opted by a 140 hand cannon, and it's obviously just not going to scale as well on a 140 as it would on something with a higher fire rate. So, okay, what do? Well, I think something interesting would be to give hand cannons slide shot as an intrinsic. Like, let's just say any new 140 hand cannon that comes out just has slide shot as an intrinsic perk. Maybe that's part of the specific 140 adaptive frame. Alternatively, you could just bring back pre-nerf Mag Howl. Like, Magnificent Howl, before the nerf that made it completely worthless, was actually a really good part of the sandbox, I think. To have 140 hand cannons specifically, right? Back when Luna was a 180, it was just like nuke, instantly kill you, 0.67 TTK that you can do nothing about. Comparatively, if you put it on a 140 now, what Magnificent Howl would serve to achieve is a kind of bullshit knife. Right? If you have Mag Howl on a 140 now, that lets you 3-tap a guy in a Rift. That lets you 3-tap a One-Eyed Mask Titan. That lets you 3-tap a Titan that's sitting behind his Overshield barricade. That lets you 3-tap a Hunter that just Wormhusk dodged. These are things that the community as a whole already hates. Like, we already hate seeing people regenerate their entire health bar right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So if you just made 140s the bullshit knife with Magnificent Howl being able to just cut through anything that you don't like, it would be really cool. It would be really interesting. So that's what I propose. I propose you bring back pre-nerf Mag Howl. You make it so if you hit 2 headshots in a row, then the 3rd headshot does like 150 damage or something stupid. Like, absolutely nukes your health bar if you already land the first 2 headshots. Because landing 3 headshots with a 140 is actually difficult. With no consistency perk like Zen Moment, Eye of the Storm, or Keep Away, landing that 3rd headshot is going to be significantly more difficult than it is right now. And also, you have to think about the fact that this will only be on new hand cannons. So theoretically, if you're actually a good sandbox team, then you could say, well, this new perk is going to be pretty powerful on hand cannons. Maybe we don't put it on a lightweight frame hand cannon with 85 base aim assist and the best base stat package in the game, combined with the best perk stat package in the game. Just a thought. Just a thought.